Before getting into the details of this case, I did want to do a quick disclaimer because there is discussion of two topics that can be difficult for some, and those are domestic violence and then also stalking. And so if you're not in the right headspace to listen to that today, please be kind to your mind, and I will see you in another episode. Today we will be looking into the unsolved missing persons case of Maribel Oquendo-Carrero, a young girl who left her home in the city of Homestead, Florida, to walk to a corner store for some candy. And after she left her house, her family never saw her again. She went missing on December 6, 1982, at the very tender age of only 9 years old. And her disappearance has truly stumped her loved ones and investigators, and the circumstances around her abduction are incredibly weird and very suspicious. So with all that being said, let's learn more about Maribel and the story of her disappearance. Maribel lived in Homestead, Florida, but she was actually born in Camden, New Jersey on August 22nd, 1973. Her ethnic makeup is both Caucasian and Hispanic, and according to the FBI's page for her, she has ties to Puerto Rico, New Jersey, New York, and Florida. She was a very cute little girl with dark hair and big brown eyes, and she had both of her ears pierced. She was about 4'3" and weighed around 54 pounds at the time of her disappearance. There aren't many identifiers on record for Maribel. Part of that is because of her age, and then the other part is that this case took place in the 1980s. So things like fingerprints and dental records we don't really have available for Maribel, and they're not on record. And so that makes it very difficult because in this case, which we'll get into in a moment, but in this case there really isn't a lot of physical evidence, and most of the evidence is circumstantial. And if you're familiar with true crime cases, circumstantial evidence really doesn't hold up in court, and it makes it very difficult for prosecutors to prosecute a person that would be responsible for someone's death or disappearance. According to the FBI website, Maribel also went by the name Marilyn, and I'm not really sure who called her that or how often she was called that nickname, but it is a second alias, and so it's something to consider. If she is still alive, she could possibly be going under the name Marilyn. Her case classification is lost, injured, missing, endangered, and so definitely many believe that after all this time, it is unlikely that she is alive. But a body has never been recovered, so that does, leave some room for hope. There is a possibility that she could still be alive. Sadly, her loved ones may never know what happened to her because unless someone who knows something comes forward, like I said before, there really isn't a lot of physical evidence, and that makes it very difficult for the investigation team and for the prosecutors. Speaking of loved ones, let's now discuss what we know about Maribel's family. Upon my research, I wasn't able to find a lot about her family, but I was able to find that for a period of time, she and her family were living in Homestead, Florida. And when I say her family, I mean her mother and her siblings. Her mother's name is Ana Maria Hernandez, and she had an older sister named Claribel. And Claribel was about 17 years old at the time of her sister's disappearance. And I wasn't able to find a lot about the other siblings. Claribel's name came up quite a bit, and that could be because she's older, so she probably remembered or was able to understand a little bit more about the family dynamics and what led to her sister's disappearance, more so than the younger siblings.
Clarabelle Oquendo was 16 years old when her younger sister Maribel mysteriously vanished from her neighborhood in Homestead, Florida. That was 40 years ago.
We haven't stopped looking for her. We won't stop. Something tells us that she's out there somewhere alive.
What we do know about Maribel's family is that it was difficult and they were very transient. They moved around quite frequently, and there was quite a bit of instability as well as abuse. And as we get into this section, just a reminder, trigger warning about domestic violence and abuse, and then also there is an element of stalking by this specific family member. So this family member in question is Maribel's non-custodial father named Emiliano Olivo Oquendo, and I'll be referring to him as just Emiliano going forward. So Emiliano was a heavy drug user, and he was both physically and emotionally abusive to Maribel's mother. His birth date is October 8th, 1938, so he was 44 years old in December 1982 when Maribel's disappearance took place. So today, Emiliano is 85 years old, and when he and Ana Maria, so that's Maribel's mother, when they were still living together in New Jersey, at the time they had 3 children, and eventually Ana Maria left him with the children, and they moved to Puerto Rico for a time, and she left to basically escape the abuse. And I wasn't able to find out whether or not the father was abusive to the children or if he was only abusive to Ana Maria, but regardless, it was vital that she get out of this, domestic abuse. And, her partner was abusing her in front of the children. And so, she was able to, for a time, escape, his toxicity and, this awful abusive behavior. But when she did eventually return to New Jersey, Emiliano was stalking her, and he would not take no for an answer. He was clearly just determined to reunite their family, specifically reunite his romantic relationship with Ana Maria, despite the fact that she was setting boundaries and, saying, no, this is not happening, because he's unsafe and toxic and abusive, and she wanted a better life for her family. During the year that Maribel disappeared, which was the year 1982, Ana Maria had taken the children to Florida. Unfortunately, though, Emiliano was able to figure out where they were, and he was relentless in his stalking, and he continued to stalk them for years. And this was the 80s, so I'm not entirely sure if there were many avenues for women finding safety and support from abusive partners. So I can't even imagine how terrifying it must have been for Ana Maria, who has, all these children who she's trying to protect as well as herself. And like I said earlier, Maribel's older sister, named Clarabelle, she was 17 years old. So she was old enough to kind of understand what was going on. And Clarabelle actually reported that there were several times that Emiliano would come to the home and threaten them. And actually 3 days before Maribel disappeared, Emiliano showed up at their home, and he was demanding that her mother continue their relationship. And Anna Maria refused. And when she refused, he actually threatened to stab her. And he said, "I'm going to take away the thing you love the most," which of course is incredibly ominous and threatening. I mean, he straight up threatened her. And we're going to be getting into the theories about what could have possibly happened to Maribel later in the video, but many agencies have actually stated that the non-custodial father, Emiliano, abducted Maribel from her family. That being said, he hasn't been formally charged with her disappearance. However, I think we can all agree that the circumstances and family history do seriously point to the possibility of foul play by this non-custodial father. It was clear with all of the stalking and, trying relentlessly to reunite his family that Emiliano was willing to go to great lengths to get the things that he wanted. And so I would not be surprised if we eventually found out that he was responsible. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But first, let's go into the actual timeline of the case and how things were sort of occurring on the day of her actual disappearance. So on the day of Maribel's disappearance, she had left home in the afternoon on December 6, 1982, to buy candy from the corner store. And a friend of her father's actually gave her some quarters to purchase the candy. And her older sister told her to take one of her other siblings with her, so that way, there would be, safety in numbers. And Clarabelle also wanted her to ask their mom first for permission. Unfortunately, Maribel kind of ignored it, and she went to the store by herself. And she arrived at the corner store called Food Spot number 21 that afternoon on December 6th.
Oquendo-Carrero walked to a corner store to buy candy.
The guy in the store told us that she was there because she knew him, he knew us. She bought a total of $5 worth of candy.
According to the Food Spot number 21 store clerk, Maribel walked in and she was wearing a white t-shirt, blue and pink pants, and new beige and brown shoes. And she came in, picked out some candy, and she spent about $5 or so on the candy. Then after that, she got into a car that was waiting outside. And after she left the store and got into this car, she was never heard from or seen again. Her sudden disappearance and the circumstances surrounding it remain very confusing, and it's made it very difficult for the investigation team to make much progress. And there really wasn't any CCTV footage that was recovered. I mean, it did take place in the 80s, and so very few establishments did have security cameras. And the investigation team, they were able to create a series of age progression photos to see what Maribel or Marilyn may look like today. And if Maribel is still alive, she would be about 50 years old. But with all that being said, let's now look at the theories about what may have happened to Maribel. Before discussing the theories, I want to stress that these are just theories and everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and not guilty until proven innocent. So we can speculate and ask questions, but at this time there are no confirmed suspects in the case, only persons of interest. So the first theory that we should look at is the possibility that she was abducted by a stranger. And Maribel was walking alone, And so an abductor could have very well taken advantage of the moment and snatched her up. The one thing that doesn't make sense, though, is that the store clerk saw Maribel get into a car after buying the candy. And it is possible that a stranger could have offered her a ride. And, it's Florida, it's hot. So walking home from the store, maybe she was tired and maybe she, took them up on the offer to drive her home. But I do think that it is more likely that she went into a car that was driven by someone that she knew. And that brings us to our second theory. Our second theory is the one that many feel makes the most sense, and that is that Maribel may have been abducted by her non-custodial father, Emiliano Oquendo. And like I said, many people feel that this is the theory that makes the most sense. But that being said, Emiliano has never been formally charged with her abduction. And according to reports by the family, Emiliano had repeatedly stalked, threatened, and abused Ana Maria, the children's mother. And this type of behavior is obviously very concerning. According to research on safeatlast.co, a site that is dedicated to informing the public about security and public safety, less than 1% of missing children get abducted by strangers, while more than 90% of abductions are committed by a parent, and 3 in every 1,000 children are abducted by a family member every year. All of the circumstances surrounding, the days leading up to Maribel's disappearance, and then, days and weeks after her disappearance, everything having to do with Emiliano is incredibly suspicious behavior. So, like I said earlier, 3 days before Maribel's disappearance, Clarabelle, her older sister, claimed that he was making threats to their mother and saying things like, I'm going to, stab you. And then also saying things like, I'm going to take the thing that matters most to you. And the family truly thinks that this was Emiliano basically saying, I'm going to abduct Maribel. And a few weeks after Maribel's disappearance, Clarabelle and Ana Maria, the mother, they actually found Emiliano in Lake Worth, Florida, and saw him driving away with what looked like a small girl in the back of his car. When he came back, he was alone, and he told Ana Maria, if you want to see your daughter again, you come live with me. Clarabelle says that Emiliano has refused to talk about Maribel and her whereabouts. He's been incredibly elusive, and Emiliano has been arrested multiple times in Florida in recent years, but it's always on minor charges, and there really isn't any connection to Maribel's disappearance. They were just, stupid things that he was doing while in Florida. Emiliano is now 85 years old, and he has dementia and is living in a nursing home. He has refused to say if he has any knowledge regarding Maribel and her whereabouts. And because of his dementia, it is unlikely that he would be able to stand trial if they did decide to charge him with Maribel's disappearance. So sadly, despite his history and incredibly troubling behaviors, Emiliano seems to have completely evaded the police and any responsibility for the disappearance of Maribel. There also hasn't been any other persons of interest named in Maribel's case. And so it's incredibly frustrating and very saddening that the one person who is a person of interest and whose history really supports the theory that he may have had something to do with her disappearance, I don't know if it's ever even going to go to trial because of his dementia and because of his age. And with so much time, 1982 to now it's 2023, that's a lot of time that's passed, and a body has also never been recovered. So it's very difficult to charge somebody with a murder when we don't have much physical evidence and so much time has passed. Maribel's case is so incredibly frustrating because I really do feel like the justice system kind of let her fall through the cracks. It's obvious to so many people that Emiliano likely had something to do with her disappearance. Most people don't believe it was just this random abduction, but there isn't enough hard evidence, and the evidence that could possibly charge Emiliano is circumstantial, and that makes the prosecutor's job very difficult. Not to mention, like I said before, a body has never been recovered, which adds another layer of difficulty. That being said, despite the fact that this case hasn't progressed much, the FBI is offering $25,000 to anyone with information leading to the recovery of Maribel or the arrest and conviction of the person responsible for her disappearance. Unless someone comes forward with information about Maribel's disappearance, it is likely that the justice that she deserves will be at a standstill. But I did want to end this video on a bit of a lighter note, and that is that people on TikTok have actually sparked an interest and really reinvigorated Maribel's case. It's actually how I initially learned about Maribel's story. And so there is hope that this cold case could potentially reach the right person and could cause them to come forward with the right information that cracks the case. And with, this reward, maybe it will inspire someone to come forward with the necessary information for the investigative team. If you have any information regarding Maribel and her disappearance, please contact the investigating agency in Homestead, Florida, and their number is 305-247-1535. And I will put all of that information in both the YouTube and podcast description boxes, so that way you can very easily find it if you have any information. So with all that being said, I just wanted to say I sincerely hope that Maribel's case is solved one day, because no one deserves their story to end the way that this little girl's story ended. She would have likely had an incredibly bright future, and I hope that even if this video encourages one more person to look deeper into her case, or if it's a sign for someone to seek safety and support if they're dealing with an abusive partner, I feel like that is time well spent on my part. And so I am going to put a link down below for a website if you are in a abusive relationship, whether it's by a family member or a partner. Just know that you're not alone, and your story does not need to end in a tragedy. You can take control of your story and get the support that you need. Thank you so much for joining me. It's goodbye for now, but I hope to haunt you again soon.